If you understand this phrase, you've kind of gotten one of the nuggets of the class. Polyculture, so we want something that's diversified. We don't want, in contrast to monoculture, right? It's just what we have in our present ag system. It's monoculture. So polyculture, so diversity, perennial. So we'd like to move towards things that aren't so much annual, more towards things that are perennial. Now we only have a handful of those when we think about herbaceous plants, like what? Asparagus, rhubarb, Jerusalem artichoke. You know, not a lot. A lot of herbs, right. Yeah, I'm talking specifically about vegetables.
Okay.
I'm saying that there aren't a lot of vegetables that are perennials. There are a lot of herbs, thank you. Definitely. So, polyculture perennial and then forest. So, borrowing our design mosaic from what we see in the forest. By design mosaic, there what I'm talking about is low story, like mosses, lichens, mid-low, like ferns and blue cohosh and Solomon seal. Then getting into sort of mid-story, which is going to be something like, not even, there's so many layers in it. See, I'm delineating more layers than are most people's versions. So let's just say, mosses, lichens, some Solomon seal, some lindera, or some blueberry shrubs, and then stuff like dogwoods or redbuds or witch hazel. And then your upper canopy gets into things like poplar and hickory and oak and beech as what we consider the mature hardwood assemblage. Initially, we might see more things like birch and white pine and hemlock. So the idea is creating gardens that in effect have our moss layer, like maybe some perennial herbs, or also like even our leaf vegetable crops, like say arugula or lettuce. And then our next layer, like our Solomon seal, and those areas are going to be more occupied by vegetable plants that go a little bit taller, like something like a tomato or a pepper plant. And then our next layer is going to be where things like our edible berry shrubs are going to be. So stuff like our blueberry, our raspberry, our gooseberry, our black and red currant, all kinds of different berry shrubs. Then our next layer is going to be stuff like semi-dwarf and dwarf peach or apricot or plum. And then our next layer is going to be standard, which is like a standard apple, standard pear. So some of that might be lost on some of you, but what I'll do is I'll return to those things as you have questions about it. Our uppermost canopy is going to be things like nut trees, like a hickory tree or a walnut tree. We see this type of polyculture perennial forest garden system a lot more in the tropics as people begin to retrofit coffee plantations. And they're realizing that in fact coffee originally grew under a canopy. And in fact coffee plantations stay more productive longer when they're grown under a canopy. So now they're growing things like macadamia nuts and almond nuts and pistachios and all these other things right above where they're getting a coffee harvest. So you talk about, this is another, now I'm getting into permaculture stuff, stacking functions. Stacking functions is what that is doing. It's stacking functions in that you're getting a beneficial habitat for the propagation circumstances you need. In other words, creating shade so the coffee tree does better, but you're also getting multiple harvests out of it. So you're stacking functions because you're creating an environment that's beneficial to the growth you want to get, and you're getting a harvest, and you're creating habitat for wildlife, and you're helping aquifer recharge, and you're helping to prevent soil erosion. So just by planting a tree on a hill, you've done all of that. You've alleviated soil erosion. You've helped with aquifer recharge. When we talk about reforestation and revegetation of eroded or damaged landscapes, we always start from the top down. Whenever you have an erosion gully, you start from the top down. You don't start from the bottom up, because if you don't have enough material or energy or time to get the whole thing done, in other words, putting in check dams or planting trees right in your erosion gully, if you don't have enough plant materials or enough time to put in the check dams or plant trees the whole way, if you just get in a couple check dams and a couple trees on top, that will alleviate all of what's happening down from it. But if you start at the bottom and you only do a couple check dams and a couple trees, then what happens up top is going to wipe out what you did downstream. It's exactly the problem with doing stream bank restoration downstream from places that have not been put under some kind of decent conservation easement. I'm seeing some nods here. Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that happens a lot.